You're listening to The Supplement here on TWR-UK. I'm James Maidment Fullard. Today, I'm joined by an evangelist who regularly talks about his faith at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. His name is Gordon Curley, and I'm going to be talking to him about what it's like to debate with others in that place. We'll also be having a conversation about the importance of evangelism and how important it is for all of us to take both the Bible and evangelism seriously. Gordon, first of all, thank you so much for being with us on today's program.
It's a pleasure. Shortly after I came to faith, I listened to Transworld Radio a lot. So to actually be on it is a great honour.
Well, it really is a pleasure to have you with us on the program. Let's talk about your faith story, seeing as you mentioned it there. How did you first come face to face with Jesus?
Not until I was about 17. I had no religious background. So as a family, we never read the Bible. We never prayed. We never went to church, apart from the usual funerals and weddings. And I had no set belief as to does God exist or not. I was a typical, if I got into trouble, I would throw up an emergency prayer. And whether it was answered or not, I soon forgot. I actually prayed at all. So I had no fixed beliefs. I wasn't an atheist. I wasn't a believer. I was just neutral, really. God was not relevant to me or to my life. I didn't see why you needed God. And being a 17-year-old male, I discovered a very good-looking female. And to my horror, discovered she was a Christian. And she did go to church. She did read the Bible. She did pray. And for the first time in my life, really, I came up against what I would call a Bible-believing Christian, someone who practiced their faith. So that was really the first encounter with a Christian.
Do you remember taking your first official steps in the Christian faith?
Sure, yeah. I mean, again, it's a kind of it was over a period of 6 months to a year, really. I had lots of invitations to go into church, but I never would. Not that I was anti-God, I was just too proud. The church was local to where I lived. If I went into the church building and I was seen, then I didn't want my reputation being tainted. He's gone religious, he's gone mad, etc., etc. So it was all down to pride rather than actual belief. And despite many invitations over many weeks, I would never go into that building. And then one Saturday afternoon, I can remember it well, I got caught off guard. I went to meet this girl at the end of her church meeting and to walk her home, being the gentleman that I am. And the meeting was going on, and I was outside waiting. And then a couple of heads popped round the door, and I remember her saying, "This is going on a bit." And I thought, "You tell me about it." And she said, "Do you want to just come in for the last 5 minutes?" And for whatever reason, I can't explain it, I kind of said, okay. And I remember going into that building, and one of the most embarrassing moments in my life, because there was only the front row 3, all the other seats were taken. I remember walking down to the front and feeling a million pairs of eyes staring at me. Of course, they wasn't. And then a singer-songwriter stood up, and he just sang a song to conclude their kind of Saturday camp reunion, it was. And I remember the words of that song just spoke into my heart. And although I didn't become a Christian there and then, that was the turning point to get my attention on God and for me to realize my own need. And so I went away, and I remember cursing her and cursing the church, saying, never go in there because they embarrass you. They pick on you. They say things like, there's someone here who's not a Christian. And everyone knew I was the only non-Christian there, or so I thought. And so I can remember openly bragging, I'll never go there again. But the words of that song that night kept coming back to me as I tried to sleep. And I knew I had to, again, swallow my pride and go back. And again, over a period of 6 months, I started to hear the Bible explained. I started to realize what a Christian was and the claims of Jesus. And that just came to a key point one Wednesday in my own experience, where I just chatted to a church leader and said, look, I need to become a Christian. What do I need to do? And he very wisely sat me down, and he talked through what it means to be a Christian. And I realized I'd been trying to become a Christian, but on my terms. I wanted Jesus in my life, but I didn't want to repent. I didn't want to turn from my old life. I wanted both. And that day I said, really a pathetic type of prayer. I said, God, I'm not sure if you're there, And I'm not sure if this is true, and I'm not sure if I can keep it up. But if you are there and it is true and you can keep hold of me, then today I want to become a follower of Jesus. And that was the moment really that turned my life around and the start of my Christian journey.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. I love hearing people's testimonies. I'd love to hear a little bit about the work you do at Speaker's Corner. Before we do that, though, maybe can you tell me what the atmosphere is like in that place? Because there are so many different people there, aren't there, with differing viewpoints?
It's a melting pot. I mean, you can go down, and if you just want a little bit of entertainment, you see the weird, the wacky, the wonderful, and the serious all on the same day, all within 2 or 3 minutes of each other. And most Sunday afternoons, Speaker's Corner only takes place on a Sunday afternoon. There's always a good crowd. Often there's a good atmosphere. And I think it's friendly banter that you kind of will hear most of all. Occasionally it does get a little bit intimidating, but not for a visitor. That would be to a certain person who's perhaps promoting either a religion or a political point of view, and then the hecklers or the opposition kicks in. And then it gives it a kind of a pantomime effect, depending on who's opposing who, because regular speakers know how to handle hecklers. And so they can give as good as they get. And of course, that draws a crowd, and a crowd brings more atmosphere. But if you're just going wandering, you can just spend a few minutes listening to someone with a political point of view, someone who's an anti-vaxxer, someone promoting the joys of the vegan lifestyle, as well as Muslims and Christians, etc. So you really have got a hodgepodge, a real mix of ideologies and beliefs there at Speaker's Corner.
I once found myself in Hyde Park on a Sunday afternoon, and I remember watching someone talking. I can't even remember what it was that they were talking about. It probably wasn't anything of any real importance to me at the time. But some people were shouting at him, and I remember thinking that must be so scary to stand up and do that.
Yeah, there are one or two who are very, very much intimidated. And there's a number of reasons why. But for the average Joe, the average person like myself, I tend to speak one-to-one with people. So I'm not on a soapbox. I'm not out to draw a crowd. I'm just out for a conversation with someone else who wants to talk about Christianity or religion in general.
Do those one-to-one conversations that you have there, do they make any difference, do you think?
Yes and no. I mean, there are those you speak to. I speak to 3 or 4 of the same people every week, and it's like talking to a brick wall. They are fixed in their beliefs. I'm fixed in mine. And really, the conversation doesn't go anywhere. But it's nice just to be friendly. It's nice to build up a relationship, because in time, I know circumstances change. And then people are more open to what you want to say. So for the 3 or 4 regulars I see most weeks, probably not. But there are always visitors to Speaker's Corner. And some of the people who are at Speaker's Corner are celebrities in their own world. And just recently, I spoke to a chap who'd come all the way down from Bradford. I spoke to another man who'd come all the way from Manchester. I spoke to a couple who'd come from Birmingham, just to hear their favourite speaker at Speaker's Corner. And I say their favourite speaker because these days, so much public speaking there is recorded and loaded up to YouTube. And so people have their own followers, and so they are celebrities in their own little world, and people come all the way down from all over the country. And those are the sort of folks who are open and you get to chat with. And I feel it's worthwhile being there. Quite a few of them are spiritually seeking out God as well. So the conversation is deep and meaningful on those occasions.
Have you noticed, when you've been speaking to people at Speaker's Corner, have you noticed whether people are getting more angry about the claims of Christ than they might have been when you first became a Christian? Yeah,
I mean, the thing that Speaker's Corner is you've got liberty to talk in quite offensive terms. So if you take, for example, the religion of Islam, there are those at Speaker's Corner who will openly attack the life of Muhammad and bring up things from the hadiths, Islamic sources, that Muslims do not want to hear. Now, you wouldn't do that if you were knocked on someone's door and you just chatted to them on the doorstep. It wouldn't be appropriate. But at Speaker's Corner, it is appropriate in that context. And those are the ones who will then get the anger and the abuse and intimidation. But overall, when I chat to most folks at Speaker's Corner, there's no hostility there. It's just either friendly banter or good conversation or good argument.
I don't think we can talk about Speaker's Corner without talking about an incident which took place earlier in the year. A Christian was stabbed at Speaker's Corner. Thankfully, she wasn't seriously injured. Her name was Hatton Tash. I understand that you were there on the day that happened. What do you remember about that incident?
Yes, I was there on that day, and there weren't many people there actually, because it had been pouring down, torrential rain, and it didn't let up at all. So the numbers from several hundred was down to about 40 or 50 people, if that. So it was very sparse. We were all under the trees, sheltering, and it seemed like a very quiet day. And most folks round about the time the incident happened were talking about packing up and going home because we were drenched to the skin, and it seemed to be a kind of a waste of time. And then as we were chatting, I chatted to one chap, and we just moved slightly forward from the crowd because of the noise. It just meant we could hear one another better. And as we moved forward, we were closer to Hatton. And Hatton on that occasion normally would have people next to her, but because of the rain, they'd moved under the tree and she was on her own. And I thought she was talking to a fellow lady, but it turned out it was a man. And I just saw him stretching out towards her. And again, I thought he was punching her because, sad to say, on previous occasions, I've seen Hatton being slapped or punched, etc. But this occasion, I saw his hand going forward twice, and I just simply said, "Stop it, no, no, no," and ran towards the person to separate them. And it was only as I got closer, I realized, one, that it was a man, and then two, he had a knife in his hand. He'd been trying to stab Hatton instead of punching her. And then, of course, when he looked at me and he saw the other people turn around, he ran away. So as far as I know, he still hasn't been apprehended or discovered who the culprit was. But yeah, it was a very frightening moment, and certainly the most violent moment I've seen in my time at Speaker's Corner. And Hatton had a slash across her forehead and to her wrist as a result of that incident.
And has she been back since?
She was back the following week, and we all knew she would be there. She is nicknamed the Lioness of London, I think, because she's got so much courage. And she is perhaps the most intimidated person at Speaker's Corner. And for two reasons. One, because she's a woman, and Islamic apologists and those who are promoting Islam there do not like to be told by a woman they are wrong or out-argued. And secondly, she is a convert from Islam to Christianity. So in their eyes, she's an apostate. And so this, she has the two characteristics of being female and an apostate that will get any Muslim's blood boiling, really. And so she's there, and she goes eyeball to eyeball with anyone who wants to talk. And she's a very courageous woman. She's a very intellectual woman. She knows her stuff. So she's rarely out-argued or debated. And so, sadly, if you haven't got an argument, people tend to use abuse or violence in response.
Well, if you've just joined us, you're listening to The Supplement, where we're joined by the evangelist, Gordon Curley. Gordon, you don't just speak to people at Speaker's Corner. In fact, when I first rang you to invite you to take part in this interview, I think you were in Moldova, if I remember correctly. So you talk overseas to talk, you travel overseas to talk to people about your faith in Christ. What's it been like for you to do that throughout your career?
Very humbling. It's a great privilege to go abroad and to share the Christian message in different countries and different situations. And Moldova, this is my fourth visit. It could have been my sixth or seventh, but lockdown has prevented a couple. And Moldova perhaps is one of the most humblest, one of those countries I feel I'm in the wrong place, because these guys seem to have a spirituality deeper than mine. And I'm thinking, what am I doing here when they could get someone more spiritual? Because they love the Lord. And Moldova is a nation where poverty is evident on so many different levels, especially out in the countryside. The villages are dying. because Moldova is a strange country, maybe 4 million people, but 2 million have gone AWOL across to Europe, and they've left children and grandparents in the country. So there's not many middle-aged people at all. And so grandparents are raising children. That means that in the villages, there's no new life, there's no gift in there. It's all been drained off by European countries. And so the villages are dying, and it's an economic drainage from that land. And it's a very corrupt country as well. And so nobody goes to Moldova. It is the least visited country in Europe, and it is the poorest country in Europe. So when I go, I feel very privileged. I've never seen poverty at a level like I've seen in some of the villages of Moldova in other European countries. But people are open to the gospel, and people are amazed that a Westerner would travel to their country to talk to them about Jesus. And so you get an open ear. So I love to work in Moldova and work with the local Christians and share the gospel. And also the mission that I link up with, the Moldovan mission, also give practical aid out to people. So they do food parcels several times a year and provide word and support pastors. It's a great ministry that I feel privileged to have been a part of.
Well, you've had these many conversations then overseas in Moldova. You've also had what must be going on hundreds of conversations with people at Speaker's Corner. If I were to ask you now, I appreciate this is a hard question, what are the most notable conversations that you've had with people?
What, abroad or at home?
Either.
I think when you encounter someone who is seeking God, and you have those moments, you know, I remember a lady turned up at our church just a few years ago, and her first words were these: I want to know about God, can you help me? And that is an evangelist dream. You hear about stories like that in books, etc. But to actually have someone turn up and say, I want to learn about God, can you help me? And just to help them, you know, on their Christian journey to discover the Lord. So conversations like that are great. They are rare and far between. Often you are initiating a conversation. And the great thing about Speaker's Corner that you don't find anywhere else is people want to talk about Jesus. If I go to my local high street, lethargy rules. People just don't want to know. If I go to Speaker's Corner, within 2 minutes, someone wants to talk, and they either want to convert me, or they want questions about, well, what do Christians believe? Why do you believe the Bible? Why do you believe in Jesus? Did Jesus actually die or not? So straight away the conversation flows. And again, just as an evangelist, as a preacher, as a Christian, I love to talk about the Lord, and it's the perfect place to do that.
It's a real pleasure to talk to you today, and I'm really enjoying this conversation. And really the theme of this conversation is evangelism. And as we head into the new year, do you think we take evangelism seriously enough?
No, maybe I'm biased, but you know, if I want to do an evangelistic activity, I can guarantee I have to chase people to come out and to get involved in the work, because most of us like a comfortable lifestyle. Most of us are busy people anyway with work, and if you're in a church, there's always things that need doing, and to do evangelism on top of all of that is quite demanding. It eats into your time. It does put you in a situation where you're uncomfortable, because, you know, when I go to Speaker's Corner on a Sunday, my knees are always knocking, because you never know who you're going to encounter. You're never quite sure, will I have the answers? And most of the time you haven't. And then you wonder sometimes, was that worth it? But I think that's kind of pride sometimes. In the end, God asks you to do your best. And if it comes from the heart and you've tried to be genuine and upfront and honest with people, then you trust God to use that no matter how you feel. And when it comes to evangelism, I think, yeah, it is difficult. It can be costly at times, but it's needy and it's worth it. I rarely come back from an evangelistic activity that I've been involved in and think, oh, I wish I hadn't done it. Normally I think that was good. That was good. And of course, the greatest thrill ever is to see someone respond. You know, we did 1,000 newspapers, the Good News newspaper, around our area the week before Christmas. And then this Sunday, we had a husband, a wife, and two little children come in as a result of that newspaper drop. Now, it only took a few hours. We weren't interacting with people. We put newspapers through the door, but they saw the advert on the newspaper and they came in. So when you see people respond, that's the greatest motivation you need for any sort of evangelism.
I think it's so important as well, isn't it? Just to say, I mean, you do some great work speaking to people face to face at Speaker's Corner. I'm on air every day talking about my Christian faith and talking about the Bible. Even I would struggle to go to Speaker's Corner and hold a conversation with somebody. I would be absolutely petrified. Now, you do that on a day-to-day basis, but actually some people are just called to put a leaflet through a letterbox. There are different types of evangelism that work for everyone, aren't there?
Yes, there is. And even at Speaker's Corner, I mean, when I first went, I hadn't planned to get into too many conversations. I just wanted to stand in the crowd and be a support for those who were on the soapbox preaching. But of course, sometimes the situation turns and the person next to you talks to you, so you get into a conversation. But yeah, any of us can go along and support and pray for a work like that goes on at Speaker's Corner. And certainly any of us can pop a newspaper through a letterbox. And the easiest invitation of all is like John chapter 4, the woman of Samaria, who just said, come and see. Come and see. You know, come to my church on Sunday. We've got this activity. Come and do this. Come and see. I think that's the most simplest and best form of evangelism.
Well, Gordon Curley, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much for your time. And please rest assured that we'll be praying for you over the next few weeks as you go out sharing your faith with people at Speaker's Corner again.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to chat to you.